So when we meditate in Buddhism, it's helpful to know which vehicle that we're utilizing. In Buddhism, our entire practice is about awakening. It's about recognizing enlightenment within ourselves, in the world, discovering that deep peace that is always available, that unreasonable joy. And there are 3 different vehicles that we can get in to travel to that place. And Trikaya Buddhism actually uses all 3, but there are other practices that only rely on one or the other. So the first vehicle is the foundational vehicle. Long time ago we called it the Hinayana, but that's become a derogatory term about the small vehicle, little vehicle. It's also been called the sutra path. So this foundational vehicle is about studying the sutras. It's about using meditation and mindfulness to essentially create a monastery, a fortress. Monks build monasteries not to keep the monks in, but to keep everybody else out. And so that's a very valid option that still happens in many places in the world, where Buddhists will go into the monastery and their practice is their life, and it's structured in such a way that they are protected from the world. Like, you get up and you take care of the monastery, you do your meditation, and everything in your life is all about the monastery and the practice, and that's it. There's no outside politics, there's no concern about people sending satellites into space, there's no worries about the environment. It's just the environment of the monastery itself that matters. And it's a very powerful way to gain control over your mind. So essentially, you're controlling your environment in order to help support control and focus of the mind. And it's, as I said, foundational. Without the ability to focus and control, it's very difficult to do anything else on the path. So that's why it's called foundational. This is where we simply learn concentration. So that type of meditation is just about concentration. So we might draw a dot on a piece of paper and concentrate on that. We might have a mantra that we focus on. We might focus on the breath. We could focus on a complex yantra or a mandala. So it can get very, very intricate, but the essence of the foundational practice is concentration. Just learning how to concentrate, how to train the mind so that you have this monastery within you. So we start off, protected from the world. We live in, make sure if we don't actually enter into a formal monastery, we spend time creating a very pristine environment in which we live. We pay attention to what objects are in our house. We pay attention to where our house is located. We pay attention to how we have our workspace. Everything is set up in order to support our practice in a very precise way. And by doing this to our external environment, then it makes it easier for us to do that to our internal environment. That's where we have our practice of beauty and gratitude, where we start to pay attention to what thoughts are arising that are developing into mind states, and then actually curating our mind states to tend towards beauty or gratitude. And we do that through mind training of just continually focusing on beauty or gratitude. And this foundational practice allows us to build a very bright and beautiful life. It allows us to create a very supportive system within us. This is the foundation. And it's something that we continually revisit. So don't feel like, oh, I'm beyond that. Because no, we're never beyond the foundation. We always come back to it and work on refining it a little bit more, a little bit more. And people can spend lifetimes there. But like everything, it's a trap. It is also a trap in itself, because we can become obsessive. We can become compulsive. Like I had a experience, I was sharing a place with somebody, and they were in this, building the pristine environment, right? And to the point where the refrigerator was perfectly organized. And we had a house guest come, and they were a little mischievous. So they would go in the fridge and move all the stuff around, make it all messy. And my roommate would get so upset, they would have to stop whatever they were doing and go and fix the refrigerator. So if you find yourself getting knocked off balance that easy, then you're missing the point of the foundational practice. It's not designed to give ourselves a tool to beat ourselves up and drive ourselves crazy. It's designed to teach us how to concentrate, how to focus our mind, and organizing our home in a very precise way is an extension of that ability to concentrate. Because you start to notice that, if my refrigerator is perfectly organized, when I open it, there's a resonance that happens within our being that, that sense of organization on the external starts to impact us on the internal. And so if we're full of chaotic thoughts and feelings and there's just rushes storming through us, and then we enter a room or open a refrigerator that is precisely organized, it has a calming sensation. That's why libraries feel so good, because everything's in its place. So it's a tool that helps us develop stability, that helps us develop balance, and it supports our practice of concentration. And you can spend, like I said, lifetimes there and become very, very good at concentrating. It can help you develop an enormous amount of peace that you can then carry with you through the world, but there's still this sense of separation because you are this monolith of peace, and then the world is all crazy all around you. To me, that's not freedom. It's a nice state. I think it's one that I want to encourage people to pursue. But there's a ceiling to it. And we can kind of create this bubble that limits us from experiencing ultimate reality. But it's a good foundational bubble, so I'm not knocking it at all. I'm saying it's very necessary. When we're ready to expand, then we move into the, we upgrade from our tank. We get used to driving around in a tank that's all very protected, and we've got, steel surrounding us every time we go out in the world. Windows are all sealed up, climate control, temperature is exactly how we like it. But it's limiting. But when we're ready to move past that bubble, then we move into a different vehicle. We opt for the convertible. We opt for the Mahayana path, which is about transformation. It's very exciting. It's very playful path. Mahayana vehicle. It's about observing mind states that come in and then looking at their opposite and allowing your mind to dance between the two. So when you get inundated with anger, you notice, there's a lot of anger here. But look at the space within which the anger is arising is total calm. Fascinating. And then so we allow ourselves to swing between the anger, and we feel it fully. There's no denying it. There's no pushing it away. There's no retreating to our tank like we did in the foundational school. That's a good skill to have, because sometimes it's overwhelming when we go into this Mahayana. We get in our convertible, start driving, and all of a sudden a big gust of wind hits us, and it's full of sand and horrible smells, and we start to spin out, and we don't feel good, and we get cranky. And maybe we're like we're full of anger, but we have no interest in seeing the calm. If that happens, then it's like, let me put the top up and go back into my tank. Let me retreat to the inner monastery and seal myself off. And that's fine, because it's always good to have that ability to remove ourselves. But like I said, it's a trap. It's a little bubble. It's limiting. So when you've gained enough personal power, when you're ready to move beyond that, we go into this vehicle of transformation. So then we're like, all right, I'm going to do it. And we put the top down on the convertible. And we feel the onslaught of the world, of all of our hidden little compartments within ourselves, all these different states that come up. And we notice when we get caught up in one, when we start to swirl in that anger, and instead of reacting with more anger or reacting with shame, saying, I shouldn't have that, instead we actually look at it and say, well, what's the opposite of this? What's on the other side of this? And then we notice that calm that goes with the anger. And as I said, we play. We feel the anger, and then we feel the calm. We feel the anger, and we feel the calm. And we swing back and forth. This becomes our mindfulness practice of swinging between mind states. And in this swinging, this transformation of one state to the other, if we keep paying attention, that's wonderful, just to be able to switch from one to the other. That's very, very powerful. But if we keep paying attention, there's this little point right in between where we're experiencing both at the same time. And that opens our awareness to the point where we can transform anything into pure light. And this is the Mahayana vehicle, where we're constantly transforming experience. We're seeing all the pairs of opposites happening all at once. It's very big. It's a big vehicle. Nothing is excluded. And it can bring us very, very high. It makes us very, very compassionate, because we see the suffering of somebody. We feel it intensely. And they're spinning out in frustration and anger. We see that fully, but then we also see the calm within that as well. And so in our compassion, we can hold that space of both and be at peace with it. So there's a lot of this inner and outer transformation that happens. And that is the path, and that brings us, like I said, to very, very high states of awareness. And then there's the third vehicle that is not very popular. The Vajrayana, the diamond vehicle, otherwise known as Tantra. Many people who practice Buddhism don't move into the third vehicle. They're just not. They reach a certain point of awakening, a certain point of practice, and that's enough. They're very, very high, very, very beautiful. And it's awesome, and that's enough. But there's a small percentage of people who see that, who see this, the swinging, the play, and it's like, but there's something else. There's something more. So we trade in our cars altogether and move into the Vajrayana, into the reconciliation of opposites, where it's about stripping bare everything that we see and experience. It's about looking at the mind itself and just seeing naked awareness. Like Milarepa has a wonderful quote of let me see, I'm going to butcher it right now. Be neither attracted nor repulsed, and that is the stone that turns everything to gold. So at this point, when we move into the Vajrayana, when we start to practice Tantra, it's no longer about transformation. We're not trying to change anything. That's the game of Mahayana, where we're changing, transforming, we're seeing the good, and we're highlighting that. We're taking the misery and turning it into joy, taking the anger and turning it into calm. We're taking the greed and turning it into generosity. We're turning fear into love. And so all of that happens in the Mahayana. And like I said, it's a wonderful game. But like I said, there's some of us that are like, I know that's not it. There's still more. So we do this practice of Tantra where we allow ourselves to peer deeply into what actually is. And it's hard to talk about because the mind is so tricky. It has a lot of preferences. It has a lot of attractions and repulsions. And what Vajrayana demands of us is to be neither attracted nor repulsed. Now, that doesn't mean reducing ourselves back to the foundational vehicle and climbing in our tank, creating our environment exactly how we want it, and then that way we can say, oh, see, I'm not attracted or repulsed. No, it means taking everything that shows up in our world, in our bodies, in our mind, and looking at it past all of the impressions, all of the intentions, all of the wishes and dreams, all of the likes and dislikes that we put on top of it. It means that we continue to peer deeply, deeply into the nature of mind. So as you can see, this is a very different type of meditation. So we have our foundational vehicle where it's just about concentration. We have our Mahayana, which is about transformation, about moving the mind from one place to another. Whee! And then we have Vajrayana, where we're going into the depths of stillness and silence, not to change anything, but to see what is actually there underneath it all. What is that screen that it's appearing on? So instead of looking at all the stuff that's written on the whiteboard or all the stuff that's appearing on the computer screen, what is the screen itself made of? And it's tricky because the mind wants to intellectualize it. It wants to say, oh yes, I'm not attracted or repulsed. My teacher had a wonderful thing that he said once, because most of us had many past lives as monks or artists, so we were all accustomed to being poor. And so we're like, we don't care about money. We don't care about that. And so he told us, he's like, yeah, you think you don't, but go earn $1 million and then give it away. And then tell me how non-attached you are to money. So Vajrayana challenges us to be brutally honest about our clinging, about our repulsions. And instead of indulging in those, to sit with them and see what's underneath them. And so our meditation itself takes on a different flavor. Our mindfulness practice takes on a different form. Instead of trying to change things, instead of trying to transform and see the brightness in all of it, we ask honestly, well, what is it? What is this? And our mind will keep digging through and it'll say, oh, it's emptiness. And it'll have this concept of just spaciousness, but it'll still be a concept. So it's digging even past the concepts of the intellect. And at this point, we start to say nonsensical things like, there is no path. is no teaching. But they all work together. I hope you see that, how the different vehicles all support each other. Without the ability to concentrate, there's really no way to do the transformations that are required of the Mahayana path. Without experiencing the transformations of playing with those opposites, of swinging back and forth and experiencing that neutral point in between, there's really no way to see beyond the transformations themselves. So I want to invite you to play with all three different vehicles. And as you do, this is vital, be brutally honest with what you are practicing. Because it's very easy to fool ourselves and say, oh, I'm doing Tantra right now. But what you're really doing is foundational practice of, fortifying your monastery. Or I'm doing foundational work, but what you're really doing is transformation. One is not better than another. One is not higher than another. They're just different ways of practicing meditation. So as we get ready for our longer meditation, I want you to consider where you are today, right now, and what type of practice you would like to do. This is a good point to clarify before you go into a meditation. Say, okay, am I going to practice concentration today? Or for this session, am I doing concentration? Or am I doing transformation? Or maybe I'm going to work on my bodhicitta, loving kindness. I'm going to do Tonglen, pulling in all the nastiness of the world and offering out all the beauty, which we'll talk about more, those techniques another time. Or are we going to do Tantra, where I'm going to sit here and see into the nature of my mind without any supports? What's underneath it all? So pick one of those and then we will practice. And if you're watching this video later, then I invite you to take a few minutes right now to sit and practice.